Welcome to episode 47 of the Necronomicon.com. And now, a word from Senator Ted Cruz.
I'm Ted Cruz. You may remember me from my failed presidential run in 2016, while others may know me as a senator from the great state of Texas. Still, others of you may know me from my late-night heavy-breathing phone calls in the 60s and 70s. Anyway, enjoy the show.
I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and sometimes I leave jars of my own urine all around the office just to upset Don.
And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, and for some reason I'm still friends with this guy.
Nobody knows why. Joining us today is Max Booth III. Max, thank you for coming on the show. I'm super excited to do this episode, and I've been literally counting down until we could talk to you today, so this is great.
Wow, well, thank you for inviting me on the show. This is going to be awesome. And before we began talking, you mentioned when you introduce yourself, you usually do a dumb joke that nobody gets until halfway through the show. I just want to say I already know what you're talking about.
Damn it.
Yeah, because, correct me if I'm wrong. We're talking about Zodiac, correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay, good. But I know Robert Downey Jr. was frustrated with how many takes he would have to do in the movie that he began leaving around just cups of piss to piss off David Fincher. Am I correct in that?
That's absolutely right. And isn't that that's so Robert Downey Jr. to me. But then I can't help but think, was there ever a moment that he mistook it for a beer or something and just grabbed it and took a drink? I don't know. It's such a weird little protest to me. You're an actor making millions and you're pissing in jars. I'm not against it. I think it's an interesting choice that wouldn't have occurred to me.
Do you think he did it in front of the crew, or do you think he went in private and came back out?
I think these were really weird Easter eggs that were being set up and hidden around the set.
But yeah, I was reading that part of it is that Fincher went to digital, and actors are used to getting a break every time the film is changed in the camera. But when you go to digital, you don't have this break. And so you can just do continuous takes. And Fincher's already obsessive anyway. People say he does 50 to 90 shots of a scene to get it the way he wants it. So that would annoy me to begin with, but you should probably know that when you're signing on for one of his movies by now. But yeah, and then they didn't get these breaks as well, so Downey Jr. was just fine, I'll just piss here instead.
Yeah, it's kind of a scumbag move, but I respect it.
All right, man. So why don't you tell our listeners about yourself and your works and anything you got coming up?
Yeah, my name is Max Booth, and I am not the Zodiac Killer, despite rumors that are spreading around online. I run a publishing company called Perpetual Motion Machine. We release books in the spooky genre, the criminal genre. I think it's called crime fiction nowadays. I write books as well. I just released a novella called We Need to Do Something, which is about a family stuck in a bathroom as a tornado passes. And I have a new novel coming out through Cemetery Dance at the end of June called Touch the Night. It is about police corruption, small towns, and demonic families.
Wow, cool. Yeah, I saw a bunch of stuff on Twitter about We Need to Do Something. And I grew up in Nebraska, so we were always stuck in tornadoes. And I'm definitely picking that up. It looks great.
Oh, thank you. This one takes place in central Texas because that's where I live, and we don't get a lot of tornadoes passing by the town I live in, at least. But about a year and a half ago, we did have an unsuspected tornado pass through, and we had to spend most of the night in our bathroom to wait it out. And I kept thinking, what if we got trapped in this bathroom and nobody ever came to get us? And that kind of inspired the idea of what became of this novella, because in the novella, a giant tree in the backyard falls and crashes through the house and is on the opposite side of the bathroom door, trapping them inside.
Wow.
Still haven't left my bathroom. This is how I'm talking to you. I'm in my bathtub. Please help me.
Somebody send help. Don, you recently moved out that way, and now you're starting to get tornadoes. Have you had anything close to you yet, or not?
There was one that happened. What were we watching? We were at the movies and watching Jumanji 2 or Jumanji Next Level or whatever the hell it's called. And, I went to go to the restroom. It was raining and everything. And then all of a sudden I'm coming back out of the restroom, going back to the auditorium, and the usher's like, all right, everybody get to the shelter. We got a tornado warning. And I'm sitting there like, oh, okay. Let me go get my wife and daughter because they've never been through any of this shit before. And we moved to the theater that has like the shelter area. And I'm just sitting there like cutting up and laughing and stuff, and partially trying to calm them because I've been through that stuff. And, we drive home and there's like destruction in some parts of town and outside of town. Nothing major. I mean, just like trees being knocked down, power lines being knocked down. But, I've had to tell them, hey, if I'm not at home and you hear that siren, here's where you go in the house. And the tree falling on the house and trapping you in has been one of the things I've thought about before. And I looked at where, at least our area is to be situated. Thankfully, there is no way that could happen.
Sweet.
I grew up in Indiana, and the sky would sometimes get that strange green that would happen before tornadoes.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
And I would get so excited, but nothing ever happened. Almost like edging, I guess.
I feel like when I lived in Nebraska, tornadoes didn't scare me at all, right? Like, I remember like going outside and watching them. I remember like it'd be pitch black, and like the only reason you knew there was one is because lightning hit and you suddenly saw it. And none of that scared me. And now that I live in Phoenix and I've been here for almost 10 years, as soon as I see anything about a tornado near my hometown, I'm like, everybody's going to die. So it's just funny how fear works like that,
Yeah, I used to not be terrified of any type of tornado or thunderstorm or anything like that. But I now work the night shift at a hotel, and it amazes me. Almost every time we have a bad storm pass through, I end up getting a family coming to stay because lightning has struck the house and just destroyed it. I did not realize how often that happens, but it happens a lot.
That's crazy. Well, I suppose we should actually jump into the movie as much as I'm enjoying talking about this. So anytime that a guest comes on, one of my first questions to them is, why did you pick this film? So you want to tell us what it was about Zodiac?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask this question, and I also failed to come up with any good response because I'm not positive. For some reason, this movie is almost like comfort food to me. I used to watch it once a year on my birthday because I just find it extremely relaxing. But now I watch it way more often than that, and I don't know exactly what that means about me, but I really like watching like newspapermen get obsessed with unsolvable mysteries, and this is basically like the ultimate example of it. Like you also have like All the President's Men, which isn't unsolvable by any stretch, but it still has the same basic layout, right? You have the guys uncovering something that seems kind of small in the beginning, but as we go, it keeps becoming more elaborate and more elaborate until they go insane with clues and dead ends. And so, yeah, I mean, I really like watching movies about obsession and conspiracies. I love how paranoid the two main characters become as they get more convinced that maybe the Zodiac is right behind them.
Yes. I mean, his mastery of showing us and making us experience this obsession and how it overtakes their lives and starts messing with every little aspect of especially the main guy's life.
And there's something really cool about like a cartoonist trying to track down this guy instead of a detective. It's unique, I think, in the perspective that we get, because usually in a movie like this, you get the detective with a wife who hates him. He's coming home late. But in this case, we get a guy who just draws cartoons for a living, and he's awesome with codes and symbols. It adds a nice touch to it, I think.
Well, and I love how the couple that solves the first one is also just kind of nobody, if you will. And I know this is all based on reality, so that's how it actually was, which makes it even better. But no, that's such a nice change, like you said, because we are usually just stuck on Super Cop or whatever else.
Well, with this one being a historically based film, what gets me is how much they tried to stay true to what was taking place, as opposed to what you would typically see in an action crime drama. That the cop knows somebody who's like this whiz with puzzles and figures it out, and then he eventually learns how to figure out the puzzles. It's people who already have that skill set, and you're seeing them combine those skill sets within their own real lives and their own reality. Because even Robert Graysmith, Jake Gyllenhaal's character, or the person that Jake Gyllenhaal is playing or portraying, he even said, he answers that question like, well, I like puzzles. I play with this stuff. I go to the library a lot. And this is kind of interesting to me, as opposed to, I've got this gift to see numbers and symbols, kind of one of those cliche things we would typically see in these movies, or it's a nothing character that gets thrown in and they're just there to figure it out.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just really cool. And going back to something you said, James, with the old couple in the kitchen solving that Phil's code, it's really funny, especially like when before we cut to that kitchen, we get what is it, 20 FBI agents stuffed in one room.
Yeah,
you got the CIA involved, the naval code breakers are involved.
And I know, like in reality, it was only like 2 or 3 guys, but to like pump up the joke, it really lands to just increase how many guys you have in that room looking at it.
Definitely. Another thing, Fincher's just known for being obsessive, as we were already saying. I was reading how he literally hired private investigators to track down the victims that were still alive so that they could interview them, so that they could get everything as close to accurate as possible. And it really shows. I was just going to say, it really shows. Like, it works so well. But yeah, go ahead.
I think they spent almost 3 years just interviewing anyone who is still alive before committing to filming anything, I think.
Yeah, it was a long time. I don't know how long, but yeah. It's so just amazing to me. Like, I can't even wrap my head around that part, let alone the 90 takes or whatever else, Just like a true absolute love for what he's doing and getting it right. And that's why this is considered one of the most historically accurate, based on a true story movies,
Yeah. One thing I really like, because like what Don was saying, in a usual action detective movie, we would also get a lot of scene point of views from the Zodiac, right? Like what he's doing. But we only see glimpses of him during the actual crimes themselves, and only when a witness survived to give a statement. Like in the movie, we don't see the original Zodiac killing at all because nobody survived. We begin with the first time a witness survived to give a statement. I think that's pretty cool too.
I hadn't even considered that. Wow, that is cool.
I think that's a good way of not glamorizing the serial killer too, because we've talked about it before on this show with serial killers or murderers, and that idea of glamorizing it within the press or within media as far as film and television, things like that. And I don't think you get that, or at least you don't get that chance for the serial killer to be glamorized in any kind of way, because one, you don't see who it is. So, there's also legal basis of, oh, well, we can't be sued by saying it was this guy. You don't see who it is, but then you also don't get to see it from their perspective. There's no romanticization of the killings. Every killing that is shown is brutal, or it was done in a brutal way or a very shocking and scary way, to where someone's not going to sit there and say, oh, you know what? Yeah, I can understand why the guy did it. Or, with the Ted Bundy thing, well, he was a really good looking guy. I still have trouble believing that he did it.
The stabbing on the beach is, I think, especially disturbing. I can't do stabbings, guys. They unsettle me so badly.
Yeah, no, that scene, I mean, that's the first thing I was thinking of. As soon as Don said brutal, my mind went straight to that scene, because it is brutal. There's no better word for it, in my opinion. That scene, like, literally fucked with me. And I'm sitting there thinking, it's so much worse because this happened, and I know how hard he worked to get it accurate.
Yeah. One of the things, I was watching a bunch of like behind the scenes videos with the screenwriter, and he was mentioning how he couldn't believe he was given a chance to go and interview all these survivals, and he was talking specifically about the guy who survived the stabbing on the beach, and he was saying how uncomfortable and awkward it was to sit down like this and talk for a few, and then eventually he would have to direct the conversation to something like, okay, but now when he stabbed you, how tight did he tie those knots? Like, how do you ask somebody that? I don't know.
That's almost a horror story in itself.
I would love to see like a movie about making this movie. I don't know. Maybe that wouldn't be good, but maybe it would.
Maybe we can hire private investigators to track down the private investigators to ask them.
Or maybe we could tie up David Fincher and ask him all those questions. And say, no, this isn't tight enough. You need to try this about 50 more times, and I'll answer your questions the right way.
Don's comments do not necessarily reflect the thoughts of the Necronama.com or James Sabata. All right, so...
They reflect mine. We'll say, since we'll... Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say with that romanticization, what I found interesting, especially when he gets later into the film, is that idea of all these people now, once the story blows up a little bit more, there are people coming forward and saying, I'm the Zodiac Killer, or I know the Zodiac Killer, just showing all the crazy leads that these police officers and FBI agents had to follow from people either turning themselves in or saying, hey, I know who this guy is. And you start thinking like, well, all these leads are bullshit, because it's just random things that people are saying. And even the one that seems credible, you start to question, well, you're casting a wide net. You're going to catch something. Some things are going to make sense. Some things are going to be completely ridiculous, but you've got to wade through all that muck to get there.
I've always been fascinated by those who give those false confessions. I don't know exactly what drives them besides maybe the chance of fame, or maybe they do become convinced that they're guilty of something. I don't know. I find it really interesting and strange and mysterious.
Yeah, we had Brian Kirk on the show recently, and we were talking about real killers who have tried to get famous basically by killing, and the whole symbiotic relationship between the media and the desire to be famous through killing others. And I was really thinking about that episode while we were watching this, because we didn't talk about Zodiac at all, mostly because I knew we were about to do it. But Zodiac, we still don't know for sure who he was, right? And It's amazing to me how he did these things that are very similar to what BTK did years later. And anyone who listened to that show knows I'm obsessed with BTK. But like sending stuff to the press and trying to fuck with the cops and leave games and stuff like that. He does all these similar things. But BTK wanted that moment where he gets his big confession and gets to tell everybody every little detail of what he did and how he screwed with you all for all these decades. And Zodiac just like fades away.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I thought that was so interesting because Zodiac, to me, is way more famous. And it's because we don't know who he is. And I feel like
Absolutely.
if we knew who he was, he'd still be Zodiac, but we'd be like, like Night. What's Night Stalker's name? Richard
Ramirez.
Yeah, like we know his name. I'm not even going to edit that out because that's hilarious that I say we know his name when I don't. But like we know who he is, but like we don't care about Night Stalker on the level that society cares about Zodiac or the way the whole world cares about Jack the Ripper because we haven't been able to solve it. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, Zodiac is the boogeyman, right? Once you know his name, he's no longer the boogeyman.
Definitely.
True. Yeah, because Arthur Lee Allen isn't as ominous as Zodiac.
If that's who he was.
If he is the person. I mean, as far as the suspects that they had, and even I think someone's son, or at least someone who was claiming that their father had done it, had come forward and said, hey, it was my dad. And even that name doesn't sound that. Hell, Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy's names don't sound that just threatening.
Now I'm thinking of what an asshole thing that would be to do to your dad. Like if he pisses you off, oh yeah, I'm gonna tell everybody you're the Zodiac. I know you were in the city at that time. I'm gonna tell everybody it was you. You better let me go to that show tonight.
So I just went looking for the guy's name. This came out a few years ago, and the guy was claiming that his biological father died like 30 years ago. Earl Van Best, his son Gary Stewart, was claiming like, yeah, my dad was probably the Zodiac Killer. Was like wrote a book about it and had these letters and all this stuff that made it seem like his dad was the guy, and even matched one of the composite sketches that was available at the time. So. Again, his name doesn't even sound that threatening, but yeah, the nicknames themselves, the Son of Sam, the Zodiac Killer, the Golden State Killer, BTK, like all these things, like once you do have that name to go along with it, the name doesn't threaten you.
Well, even now,
it's
like
that
if I
image.
say Dennis Rader, you don't care. BTK, you're like, oh yeah, that dude,
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I just
all those names suck.
I just find it so fascinating that we had literally just talked about people trying to get famous, and I feel like Zodiac accomplished that, but in a very different way. And I don't know, that's just fascinating to me. If anybody's interested, go check out the Brian Kirk episode after this.
What I find fascinating about the true story and also the film is the fact that he tried to fuck with the police and investigators so much, just by saying, by even calling in emergency services and saying, hey, there are two people dead. I killed them. This is how I did it. This is how I did it. And then writing the letters to the different newspapers and stating, I'm the guy. This is how I did it to prove that I'm the guy who did it. And now I'm going to control the way that things work out. I'm going to control this situation. So it's like he was getting off on that power trip, and then also the idea that he's the only one who knows, and they have to listen to him. And he's going to be famous to the point where the police were claiming he was taking credit for kills and murders that he had no connection to.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, the killings he did do. I mean, yeah, they were horrific, but they'll compared to like the type of boogeymen we get today, they weren't that. I think the reason, like you guys were saying, we do still talk about him is the fact that he was fucking with police the whole time and all of these cryptic codes he would send. I mean, that's what makes the Zodiac the Zodiac.
Definitely. I mean, I feel the same way about Jack the Ripper. Like, I feel like nobody really cares about the murders. We care about the newspapers were all over it, and he just became this larger than life thing, and there were something like 200 suspects and all this other shit. Like, it's the hype around it that we care about. And same with Zodiac, except he was making his own hype, and I find that so interesting because I expect somebody to do it again. Like, we have social media now, and we have all these things Zodiac didn't have access to. So,
well, I got a question for two of you with respect to that, because this was a question that was posed in the film, indirectly posed. But the press, they were having that quandary of, well, should we print the letter? Should we print the manifesto? Should we do any of this shit? Because if we don't, people will die. And then people were saying, well, he's a killer. He's going to kill people anyway. So let's fucking print the letter. And my question is this, and answer this however you want. But if the killer's going to kill anyway, one, does it matter if you print their shit up? I mean, just to satisfy them by, printing their manifesto, even if there aren't any clues or clues to decipher or anything like that. But printing their letter or manifesto on this, like Ted Kaczynski wanted, is it really a problem to post their letter, their thoughts in these newspapers if they're going to kill anyway? I mean, do you think that the newspapers, the police, anybody really should take any of the blame or expect any of the blame if something happens?
I don't know. I think maybe by releasing all this stuff that these guys write and come up with, maybe you might be feeding into exactly what they want, and maybe they then begin craving even more attention, and maybe you also possibly inspire other nut jobs to do similar things if they see, oh, well, this guy is hitting it off.
Yeah, I could see that. So my answer is going to be a little weirder. Okay. Number one, I think that the time matters. Okay. This is what, 1969-ish, right?
69 is when it really starts kicking off.
Okay, so either way, I think at that point, one, you want to sell papers, and you're going to end up reporting this either way. Okay? So I think the fact that it went to all three newspapers is enough to make you have to do it, because your competitors are going to do it. Or at least you think they're going to. And even if you called them and asked them, can you really trust that? I don't know. So I think right there, as a business point of view, you have to do it. Number two, I think that since he said he would kill people if you didn't, you get an out. You get to say, I'm not the bad guy. I was trying to stop more from happening. Yes, it sucks that I did this, but blah, blah, blah. On top of that, the fact that it's a cipher, I mean, are you really printing anything that weird? You're not graphically describing some terrible thing. It's a puzzle, right?
Yeah. I guess I was thinking more of like manifesto wise.
Okay, yeah. Getting to that, like the thing I would add is like, I feel like there's a difference between that time and releasing a newspaper once a day or twice a day and what we do today, where we literally jam a school shooting down your fucking throat for 24 hours after it happens and, up till the next one, which is also 24 hours. I think there's a huge difference between putting it in your paper once and people can decide if they want to give it attention or not versus the constant barrage that we do today. What do you guys think of that?
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, I can follow that.
Well, my work here is done.
There's a dilemma as to what the media's responsibility is in this. You have limited avenues to get your information, from local papers, radios. You had 3 major networks. And there's that balance of trying to, on the part of media, to not give the killer what they want, but also in trying to do the right thing by their profession and reporting the story and getting this information out to the public. Because if you don't, you're not doing your job. In this film, you had members of the paper discussing the ethics of printing the letters and codes, and it's probably a discussion that still takes place in newsrooms today. Like 12 years ago or 12, 13 years ago, NBC was facing that same dilemma when the Virginia Tech shooter sent them photographs and videos as well as a manifesto. And their question was, should we or should we not go forward with this? And they were hammered pretty hardly for it, but they aired the footage from this killer as far as like what his plan was and why he was doing what he did.
Because there are so many moving pieces with this type of story, and it's fascinating to think that it's more than just about a serial killer.
Absolutely. I mean, going back to this movie specifically, is it really a serial killer movie or is it a newspaper movie?
I think it's interesting how it dances through a lot of different genres.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel like, or at least I felt like, the movie is almost in sections. And like over here, it's a police procedural, and over here, it's kind of an action thing going on, and over here, it's almost horror when he's in this dude's apartment, and it's so flawless the way it flows between different genres, but then it's also noticeable. And I thought that in and of itself was kind of weird to me. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but
no, I got you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say it does that dance because the parts that were the most unsettling for me, aside from the beach or the beachside or lakeside murder, was when he's in that house, and when Jake Gyllenhaal's character's in that house, and you are 100% convinced at this point, oh my God, this guy has to be him. This guy has to be the killer because he just admitted, oh, I'm the one who makes the posters. That's my handwriting. Oh, I've got the movie here. Oh, I've got this. I've got the schedule. So you're sitting there like, this fucking dude is the killer. And you start to get in that moment where you feel like you're in that moment that he's in. I'm in this basement with this guy. All the clues are here. I'm just a fucking cartoonist at a newspaper. I'm not a cop. I'm not carrying a gun on me. I've got no way to protect myself. And this guy's probably him. Now, he's an older man, probably not in the best of health. I'm half his age, probably in much better physical shape. But this guy could probably fucking do something to me. And just the fear of that the unknown, and somebody else is probably here, and maybe it's not just one person, maybe it's 2 or 3 people doing this. Like, I need to get the hell out of this house.
Max, the one thing I will say to your question is I don't think this is a serial killer film because he's the one character that we're unconcerned about the entire movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And that basement scene is probably one of the most terrifying scenes in any movie I've seen. It's definitely the one scene that everybody always talks about when mentioning this movie, I think.
It's a great scene.
The suspense is just, it's almost tangible. You could reach out and touch it. It's so thick.
Well, and that's what I was talking about how Fincher just like somehow manifested that feeling of paranoia and obsession. Like, it's weird to me how we're a complete reflection as the audience of Robert. We start out and it's a fun little game, and then pretty soon we're sucked in. And by the end, we're totally into it. Like, this movie's, 2.5 hours long?
Mm-hmm. So like 3, yeah.
Most movies, I would be like, fuck you in your runtime. I don't have the attention span for that. But I was, totally into this. And I'm just sitting there, and it's almost becoming an obsession as well. And I have something that Robert doesn't even have. I know that we don't get an answer. The film kind of gives us an answer. But, in reality, we don't necessarily have an answer. So I have that knowledge that Robert doesn't even have, and it's just growing along with him the entire time. And I find that fascinating how we have that relationship with him and how well done that is.
What's funny with this movie is I've seen it countless times at this point, and every single time it tricks me into thinking that Graysmith is going to solve this thing by the end of it. And every time I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? Even though I know what happens, it does such a good job of doing this crack shot sleuth with Graysmith. It makes me believe he's going to solve this damn thing, and he doesn't, and no one does. And that's like the greatest fuck you to anything a movie can do. And I wonder how pissed off it made those who weren't familiar with the case when they saw this movie. I mean, I can imagine them leaving the theater thinking, what the hell was that?
And then they were probably like, no, see, it was this guy because he gets to look him in the eye. So we know that that's the thing. And it's like, yeah, maybe that's there to make you a little happy, but I would argue that that's not necessarily an answer so much as it's the answer Graysmith needed to continue with his life.
Yeah.
Right.
I know, I mean, it seems like the movie has somewhat of an opinion on who maybe did it. But I know, I mean, it's been a long time since I did any research into the actual Zodiac, so my memory sucks now. But I know I remember obsessing about this a long time ago. And once you look at all the suspects, it really is like a fucking crap shot, man, like who could have done it. But imagine how long the movie would have been if it explored every single suspect. I mean, I know
a Netflix series.
Yeah, 6 seasons long.
But instead we got the amazing Mindhunter from David Fincher, which is basically like the Zodiac expanded. At least it has the same mood to it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing, like I was saying, how it grows our obsession alongside of Graysmith, it also grows our paranoia. Like, you get to the point that anybody that's in the background of any scene, you're kind of like, who's that dude? Have we seen him before? What's he doing over there? You know? It's so well done. And the way he does the shots, and again, I know the work that goes in with the 90 takes to make sure that it's perfect, but like the shots work so well to make you question everybody in the background or just anything that's in the shot. You're kind of just drawn to it all. And the paranoia is just tangible. It's fantastic.
It's funny, speaking of the shots, I was watching a behind-the-scenes thing, and there was a 3-second cut of Graysmith throwing a sketchbook into the passenger seat of his car, and they're about to film it, and the lady behind the camera, she goes, do you want to take a bet of how many takes this is going to be? He goes, maybe 3. And then David Fincher comes up, and they begin filming. The sketchbook into the passenger seat. He goes, no, again, and they do it for like 39 takes, and by the end of it, he is just exhausted. At one point, David Fincher, he goes, no, wait, I'll show you. And he walks around, he grabs it, he tosses it into the passenger seat, and Jake Gyllenhaal is just looking at him like he's a lunatic.
You would have to at that point. You know what? I want to apologize to Robert Downey Jr. because now I want to piss in jars and leave them for this guy. So.
But do you think that David Fincher had to clean up those piss jars? I doubt it.
Oh,
right? That's a good point you make.
Some intern probably had to go and dump those out every day and went home smelling like piss to the wife or husband, and eventually got kicked out on the streets.
And the worst part is, nowadays, following Avengers, you could sell those jars of piss for so much money on the internet.
I hope they save them.
You could take them to a con. Whoa, yeah, you can't do it now.
Oh, man, that's rough. Please don't bring them to a convention and bring them to my table.
I've definitely been to a convention where someone brought jars of piss, but I don't know who they belong to. Something interesting about this movie, I think, that maybe isn't discussed as often. Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm not involved in many Zodiac discussions, so this is a treat. Is that the last Zodiac killing is less than 50 minutes into the movie. And then he vanishes from the movie completely.
Yeah. You know, I did actually notice that because, you know how I was saying that it kind of feels like different movies sewn together. I feel like the first, hour and a half, I don't know exact times here, but, it feels like it's one story. And then it feels like we switch over to this other story that's all about Graysmith.
Right. Yeah.
And I read something, I don't want to take credit for this. I read that his jacket changes like halfway through the movie. And it's like representative of how Zodiac has taken over his entire life at that point. And so I'd kind of like to go back and watch it again and just see like where the jacket changes and see if that's where I feel like the two movies are sewn together at.
Okay, that brings a question then. Seen this before and watching it for the podcast?
I have not, and I missed out because my wife has seen it. This is the first time I've seen it because it came out when I was in the Army, and it was just one of those things where I didn't catch it, and it would be on, Showtime or HBO, and I just never got in the mood to watch it. And so when this came up, I was like, oh, finally, I'll actually get to sit down and watch, the Hulk, Iron Man, and Mysterio, battle out to find out who's going to be the Zodiac Killer.
Oh, man. What kind of terrible person would make a terrible photo of that? Certainly not me. I didn't plaster it all over our social media. I had not seen it all. I had seen little bits and pieces, and honestly, the runtime was a total turnoff for me. I think I've mentioned this before on this show. I have really bad attention problems when it comes to long movies. And unless I'm like really into it and turn off all the lights and it's got my sole attention, I'm screwed. And so like I'd been at like friends' houses when it was on and seen pieces of it, but never like the whole thing. And watching it that way, while interesting, was also off-putting because I'm like, it just jumped ahead like 3 weeks. What the hell's happening here, And now I get it. And yeah, I'm really glad we watched it. And like I said, I think that runtime would have totally turned me off to it. So thank you for suggesting it.
Yeah, I think the best way to watch this is to brew a nice big pot of coffee late at night and have all the lights off and just maybe get like a notebook so you can begin scribbling like suspicions on it. I don't know. It's a good movie to get obsessed with.
I'm going to disagree. I think the best way to do it is to go ahead and make a gallon of the aqua velva so you can enjoy it through the entire viewing.
I believe that's a fake drink, right? Yeah, it is. And I know this because I was watching the DVD commentary last night on it, and for the longest time they just called it the blue drink. And David Finchel didn't like them just saying, oh, I want a second round on the blue drink. So finally he just said, okay, call it Aqua Velva, which was the name of the aftershave his dad used to use.
Right.
That's great. I just pulled it up, and Aqua Velva has become a cocktail because of the movie.
Amazing.
So yeah, that's
for those of you who are wondering how to make it. You just need blue curacao, gin, vodka, orange, and lemon. I'm not going to give you quantities. Figure that out yourself.
Just keep trying until you get it right or really, really wrong.
Or just use food coloring if it's not blue enough.
Just blue juice.
Who keeps leaving these jars of Smurf piss everywhere? All right. So I'm really stuck on this.
Oh, anyway. Shit. Do you think they will piss in blue by the end of that scene? Because you know how many times they probably had to shoot that scene.
Oh, God. That adds a whole new dimension to this.
It was the only time RDJ was not complaining.
He was out of it, man. Something else, because with the long takes, that scene where Graysmith runs inside that restaurant and it's raining outside to meet his love interest, newspaper on his hands. And he did the shot so many times, the ink on the newspaper made both of his hands black, and they had no idea what to do with that. So he just kind of kept his hands underneath the table as they were filming the next scene.
Oh, that's great.
It's nuts. All those newspapers, I mean, if you open them up, they'll completely stocked with real text from that specific day in history. They had someone go through like the databases and the archives and reprint all these newspapers just to be accurate.
No wonder all of his movies are about obsession.
Yeah.
Something, and this was great as far as when they were, I guess, doing the call-ins for the talk show, because this could have taken place at any moment of discussing the Zodiac Killer. But there's this great conversation about the worthiness of the victims that takes place in the background, where it's like, oh well, it's just happened to these country folk. I don't care about that. But then the next caller comes in and says, well, it's happening to everybody. Now, if it were happening in the den of the inner city with all those Satanists, well, and then the next person says something like, these are good people. These aren't hippies and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm sitting there thinking, like, we do this today. It doesn't matter if it's a serial killer, it could be a random shooting or whatever. But there becomes this moment where people start, or the public starts trying the victims and determining, hey, we really shouldn't care that much about this person because they did this. No matter what the crime is, whether it happens to be a murder or sexual assault, something like that, there becomes this trying to rationalize why this person had this horrible thing that takes place on them or to them.
Yeah, that's a great point. I agree. It's pretty heavy to think about.
There are a couple of funny things I found. One was when they first go through Lee's home, and there are all the squirrels there. And for me, I'm watching it and just kind of being the asshole I am when I watch movies. They open the door, and I can't remember if it was Mark Ruffalo or Anthony Edwards. Their character says, hey, close the door. There are rodents running around. And I'm thinking to myself, the asshole that I am when I'm watching this is, this guy probably knows that he has rodents running around his fucking house. I think it'll be okay if you open the door. But just seeing that he had these pet squirrels there, and I honestly had not seen that anywhere else except for one time when my family, when we first moved to Georgia, and we were looking at houses, and one of the houses had a fucking squirrel like cage system. Like, they had pet squirrels in the house, and I was just thinking to myself, like, now after watching this movie, I'm like, that was fucking Zodiac Killer's house we were in. He wasn't in California. He was in Georgia. He
You
moved
could have
all the way
stopped
across.
him.
Yeah, I could have stopped him. But more seriously, with respect to the movie, something else that I looked at historically was the use of technology. And the way that technology itself, or at least the lack of technology, slowed down the police response. So, you had the Vallejo, you had San Francisco, you had the FBI, you had all these police departments, sheriff's departments, and law enforcement agencies trying to work together, but they couldn't because of, they didn't have a fax machine. Or, you had to drive down and physically bring your files or come and look at their files. And just thinking about how, whether the Zodiac Killer knew this or not, as far as the advantage that he had, the ability for these murders to take place and the amount of murders, I think he claimed 37 murders, but to have all these murders take place that he either did or claims to have done, take place that could have been stopped by something as simple as, integrated system or better technology or better communication, because, these guys don't know what's taking place in each other's cities. And, it's remarkable to see how that can play such a role in this guy getting away with what he was doing.
You see that type of conflict in you see that type of conflict in a lot of James Ellroy fiction too. All these different police jurisdictions just not being able to collaborate with each other, and sometimes just clues passing each other by because there's no way for them to meet like once a week and just go over everything everybody has collected. It's right. So frustrating.
That's kind of one of the things that I think makes Zodiac even scarier, because when he goes to Riverside, like, you'd be seeing all this stuff that's happening in San Francisco because, it'd still be in the news. But then when it hits where you are, there's no way to know ahead of time. There's no, like, There's no tracking. There's no like it's going in this order kind of thing. I don't know. That's I noticed when they mentioned it, but like I had never considered that aspect before in regard to this kind of thing. And I think that it really increased the boogeyman status and the longevity of how we hold on to him.
Well, there's that aspect that, as far as like that it's there, there's no pre-warning that, but even some of the warnings were screwed up because with that taxi cab murder, the first report is, it was a black assailant who did it. And then you find out, as Mark Ruffalo and Anthony Edwards are arriving on the scene, like, oh no, it was a white guy with a crew cut who did it. And this is what he looks like. And they find out that a couple of patrolmen were in the same area and didn't stop the guy because he didn't fit the profile.
Yep.
And if they had been a little bit clearer or at least had a little bit better witness, somebody would have, you could have easily said, hey, this is the guy. He kind of looks like the guy that was getting out of the car. Let me talk to you, because even after the detectives or the inspectors are sitting there grilling these two patrolmen and saying like, well, why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you stop him? Like, he wasn't the person we were looking for. we can't stop something. It's one of those weird things to look at in a movie like this. It's like, we couldn't just stop him for being there. And, just how the frustration these police officers had, because they're sitting there like, well, we knew it was a white guy. And these police officers saying like, no, the radio told us it was a black guy. So that's who we were looking for. We're not going to stop him. And just showing like how there's so much confusion, aside from technology, but how there's so much confusion over what's taking place and not knowing how severe this situation is, even early on.
Yeah, the theme of miscommunication is high in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
So do you guys think Graysmith is the Zodiac?
Is that one of the theories out there?
I don't know. It's mine. It's my fake one that I don't think is actually true, but I like to think maybe it is.
It would make for a good movie,
Yeah.
Hey,
I just feel like, I want to be famous. What would be great if I just killed all these people and then wrote a book about it?
Well, and it's a whole lot easier to do if the guy that most people are assigning to this title or this this role of being the serial killer is dead. Both of the guys that were seen as the top suspects.
Yeah. I don't actually think it was Graysmith, but I find it. I mean, maybe
I'm willing to jump down this rabbit hole with you, though. I think it's great. He's a loner. He's an outsider. He doesn't get to go to the bar with everybody else. Like, he's losing his family, and like he's alone. Like, be great. It's a great rabbit hole. I want to go down this.
Look, before they hit the Aqua Velva, remember they describe him as the Boy Scout. He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't curse. Then Robert Downey Jr.'s character Paul Avery finds out like, oh yeah, he has this the Aqua Velva drink. That's what he has. But even when he's talking about, oh yeah, I knew the code because when we were in Boy Scouts, and Avery's like, I wasn't in Boy Scouts. Not everybody was in that shit. He's like, well, yeah, we figured out to do this. Another thing that you figure out to do in Boy Scouts or do is not tying. So, I mean, to go down this rabbit hole, let's do it.
Okay.
One of the things that you get when you're in Boy Scouts is a knife.
Yes.
He is one of the few people in the movie to say, I like puzzles, too. So.
Do you remember that one scene where he goes up to some random strange one and goes, hey, I'm the Zodiac, and then he runs away? That was pretty suspicious.
Especially how he killed him before he ran away.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that scene. Also, if you think about it, at the Lakeside killing, he does tie them. He ties them up, right? And as we all know, only Boy Scouts know how to tie knots, so that's pretty suspicious.
It's all suspicious. I'm pretty sure he did it. Just let's get Graysmith trending.
Let's cancel Graysmith. Hashtag cancel Graysmith.
Can you imagine the Robert Graysmith is over party and everybody's like, who the fuck is that?
Only a bunch of internet creeps will know who we're talking about. One of my favorite things about this movie, and Don, you kind of just mentioned it when they were talking about being Boy Scouts, is the way that those two kills constantly interact with each other. It's almost like a buddy cop movie in that aspect, right? Because I just love how he's constantly looking at Graysmith like, what am I doing with this geek?
It is. See, that's another genre that they flow through.
Pick a genre, Finchel. It's also pretty. It goes into the erotica genre if you think about it. Don't ask me to explain that one.
Just tell everybody that you'll explain it in the future, and all they have to do is join your Patreon. The $200 a month level gets to know.
If you join my Patreon, you can read all of my Zodiac erotica fanfic.
I suppose we'll jump back on track here. Don, I know you had something else you wanted to say.
You know, the thing that really pushes Graysmith is, you know, he's, at least in the interview, and I think they even include in the movie, talks about, you know, it was kind of like this nagging thing. He couldn't get rid of the Zodiac as far as thinking about it, right? And so what does he do? He says, I'm going to go ahead and start researching and writing a book, which, you know, is not sure if that's a guise to excuse himself actually researching this and trying to solve the case, or he's genuinely like, I'm going to go ahead and write a book. Because when he first says, I'm writing a book on Zodiac, somebody they said, well, another one? Like, aren't there enough of those already? And you know, James, we've talked about this before, you know, in person on an episode before, but there is that sense that the public, and it doesn't matter, you know, what country we're talking about, there seems to be this obsession with the spectacle of serial killers, or the idea of serial killers, and you know, everything that comes along with it, whether that happens to be, you know, thinking about the victims, the method in which these serial killers act, who these people are, as far as that whole, you know, it was the quiet neighbor, it was the boy next door, or, you know, in the rare occasion it was, you know, it's a woman. But there's always this thing within the public of, if it happens, people are, it's a mix of shock, but then also curiosity. What do you two think about that?
Go ahead, James.
I feel like, as an audience, we're almost as guilty as the media. If we didn't provide the demand, then there would be no reason to have the supply. So while I constantly shit on the media for glorifying killers, basically, or shoving school shootings down my throat, like, at the end of the day, am I not clicking the headlines? Am I not watching the news? You know? And I think it's weird how we have this obsession with killers. I get why society has an obsession with death. Mm-hmm. Death is the ultimate unanswerable thing, you know? Like, and when we get the answer, it no longer matters. Right? Like, but killers is interesting to me because we don't talk a lot about the victims in real life.
Okay.
And I know recently there's been a push, like, remember the victims, not the shooter, or whatever else. I kind of feel like that's never going to happen. We're always going to care more about the killer, and I can't help but wonder what that says about us.
Well, I have no, like, long-term supporting theories to this, but what you guys were saying, my thoughts would be, I mean, the victim is the effect, right? And the serial kill is the cause, and I think the cause is always going to be more interesting.
That's beautiful. Look for my new novel, Cause and Effect. No.
I also think maybe we like to imagine ourselves as killing someone, meaning like, man, what would it take for me to go down this route? what would happen in my life to make me do something so messed up?
Well, you bring up a good point. There is a lot of that. I mean, you got what's been affectionately referred to as investigative murder porn on like the ID channel and whatever other channels that run those types of things. And whenever they have the serial killers, it's always, here's where his mistake was. And it's almost become this pop culture thing of, oh shit, I need to figure out, if I ever became a serial killer, I should not do this or I should not do that. In addition to the, what would it take for me to do something like that?
I think secretly we all have these fucked up plans to go become a serial killer one day. Just most of us decide not to do it, but if we did, we'd never get caught.
Right.
That's right. And then we'd release a book called Here's How I Would Have Gotten Away with It. No.
We released a book called Cause and Effect.
Exactly.
Well, we just released a book about how we spent decades obsessing with the case when in fact it was us the whole time. I'm on the Gray Smith, you goddamn Zodiac.
I could totally see that happening now. Like we talked about Tragedy Girls in an episode, and I don't know if you've seen Tragedy Girls or not.
I have.
But it's basically these two high school girls, and they're running a social media site. So they start killing people so that they can be the first to report it and have like the best info and that kind of stuff. But they don't want to get caught,
Yeah.
And I can totally see this sort of thing coming our way. When you look at BTK or you look at Zodiac and that need to fuck with the police. Well, now you got to up it even more. You got to make sure that your GPS isn't tracking you. Mm-hmm. You're not going to find a payphone to call the cops the way that Zodiac does. He didn't pick up his cell phone on the drive over from the park. You got all these extra little things that would be like so little challenges,
Yeah, like, do you think like a 2020 Zodiac would be making TikTok videos?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine he'd be stabbing on the beach and then it would like rewind so he would keep stabbing and it would just like keep just back and forth.
Zodiac
I'm literally making the motion
2020.
as I'm doing this.
Zodiac challenge.
Hashtag stabby vibes.
I think
Send all your stabbing videos to us.
Tag us on Twitter when you kill somebody.
That's right. Because as much as we don't want to see it, we're human and we're going to watch it. All right. So I don't think there's a better place to end this. That was great. Max, I want to thank you again for coming on the show and for getting me to watch this. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on social media or get your books, whatever else?
Yeah, you can go to my website, Tales from the Booth. It has links to all the books and my social medias.
So that wraps up this week. As always, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we'll see you next week here on the Necronama.com.